Very good afternoon once again. Welcome back to Tech and Asia's PDC 2022. If you're just joining us, you picked a great time to drop by because up next we have a fireside chat where Ethan Eisman, Vice President of Design at Slack, is going to talk about the company's design process and strategy. Here to moderate the fireside chat is my colleague, Tech and Asia's very own product and engineering lead, Celine Wong. I'll hand it over to them, and guys, you can take it away.
Thanks, Nat. Hello, everyone. I'm Celine from Tech in Asia, and I'm excited to have Ethan, the VP of Design at Slack, with us today to learn about Slack's design process and strategy. He has a wealth of experience in the space of product design. Prior to Slack, he was leading teams in Airbnb, Uber, and Google. So we're super lucky to have him here with us today. So thanks, Ethan, for your time. So Ethan, how are you? Can you maybe tell us a bit more about your role at Slack to give everyone a bit of context?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm very happy to be here. It's early for me. It's 7 a.m. And there's no better way that I'd be spending my time than with you here. So a little bit about what I do at Slack. I lead their product design team. It's a team of about 90 people. And we focus on the user experience of Slack as a product, from the moment people first learn about Slack on our website all the way through product onboarding, getting comfortable and becoming more sophisticated in Slack, and all of the features in Slack. So my team is responsible for the end user experience associated with all of that.
Great. That's really cool stuff. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about the design philosophy at Slack.
Absolutely. So first of all, Slack is your digital HQ. It's a place that's connected, it's flexible, it's inclusive. It's a place that everybody can contribute to and be a part of. And, we do three things that make us quite different. We break down silos within organizations. We empower employees to succeed from anywhere. And we also automate the work of work. And that's oftentimes how my team works as well within Slack. So we sort of live our mission in the way that we work. But specifically, when we think about our product design team strategy, we focus on strategy as much as we focus on execution. Okay, so execution matters to us just as much as strategy. But when we do look at strategy, our design team works very much side by side with our product and engineering team. So we don't have silos within the product and engineering and design organization. We work as one team. And what we typically do is look 3 years into the future to think about where the big trends are going, where our product can solve the biggest problems for our customers, where we need to improve the product. And then strategic planning takes the form of discussions. Where are our customers headed? Where is the market headed? What do we need to do to support our customers? And we have inputs into those discussions from our research team, which is oftentimes doing work that's looking further into the future, and from our business development team or our business team. It's business operations and development. And they're really looking at how Slack can succeed as a business. And then there's other vectors that come into it where we see people's needs emerging and evolving over time. So for example, when we went into the pandemic, we knew that we needed to become people's digital headquarters and evolve from being people's channel-based messaging and collaboration platform. And so with that, we added brand new ideas onto our product strategy in response to the pandemic. So it's a 3-year strategy, but it's also flexible, takes into consideration things that are happening. And then we discuss this during a series of offsites with the leadership team, and we get alignment within the leadership team. Then after we discuss it, we write it down into a good document that everybody can read. And writing about it helps us think about it even better, because oftentimes when you write, you're forced to think and you sort of look at your logic and make sure that it makes sense. And then design will take this strategy. So we're part of those conversations, but then we take the strategy and then we apply design's sort of superpower to it. So we visualize it. We bring the strategy to life in pictures. But these pictures are more than simple drawings. We look deeper to find real world use cases, real problems that our customers have. And then we take these use cases and we apply the strategy to those use cases. And then we turn the strategy into a story. So, this customer, let's say this customer maybe works at IBM. They have a specific set of problems. And then what we do is we use that problem, the story of their problem, and then we apply a vision for where the design might go based on the strategy to that problem and turn that into a story. And so sometimes those stories are a series of storyboards that show different features as they evolve over time strategically. Sometimes we can turn them into a short movie that inspires people and can be shared across the company. And the reason why we build these things is we consider them North Stars. So, when you're sailing on the open ocean, at least I think it's in the Northern Hemisphere, you're tracking towards the North Star. And that means that you're not always hitting the North Star. It's a star. You're never going to reach the star. That's not your destination. But you're using it as a guide in your ship through waters that are wavy and churny and different currents. And so we use those strategic visions in the same sort of way. They paint a picture for where we're headed, but we know that when we execute, we won't actually land exactly where we're headed. We'll learn new things, as we start building. So we use those visions as North Stars to lead us forward.
That's very interesting. Thanks for sharing that. Since you mentioned North Stars, I'm curious to find out, like, for the design team, how do you define like goals and like KPIs? Are there actually any hard metrics that you track, or like how does success look like?
Yeah. So we don't have. I'm gonna have to pause. I just had a Salesforce update that popped over my entire screen, and I need to defer it now. Okay, let's start over. Ask that question again. Sorry, that really sucked.
Worries. Okay, so since you briefly touched on North Stars, I'm the North Star at Slack. I was wondering, like, if you can share more about how the design team defines like goals and KPIs. Do you have any like hard metrics, or how do you approach that, and what success looks like?
Yeah. So again, design, engineering, and product, we work as one organization, and so we inherit the OKRs from essentially the rest of the organization. So when we go through, first we have that 3-year strategy planning, and then that comes down to a 1-year strategy. And then that 1-year strategy is broken down into quarterly strategies. And those quarterlies were aligned at each phase. So Slack is organized by pillars. We have basically product pillars, cross-functional product pillars for each major area that will drive a different part of our strategy. And so within those pillars, every quarter, the leaders meet, cross-functional as well. And they determine what are their goals for that quarter, what are the projects for that quarter that will allow them to meet their OKRs. And so that's basically how we align with our overarching business OKRs. And then we do essentially a meeting every week to track how we're doing against those OKRs. We also do OKR, like this quarterly OKR meeting, so that everybody in the organization can learn about the OKRs. And interestingly enough, now that we're working in this sort of new hybrid model where we're mostly remote, but some people are in the office, what we found is that we're starting to innovate with our OKR process. So one of the things we're doing at Slack when we evolve into the digital headquarters is we're creating new features that allow people to share audio or video clips in Slack. And so this last quarter, instead of having Zoom meetings where we had OKRs with a bunch of people in Zoom meetings, and you had, a week and a half back-to-back, review meetings, instead of doing that, every pillar created their own set of clips and then provided their strategic plan for that quarter into a channel for their team, for their pillar. And then we reviewed those clips asynchronously. And we're then able to provide key feedback on the information in the clips and in their strategic goals. And that was really efficient because it allowed people to figure out when they wanted to actually review those clips. We had about a week time to review them, but people could integrate them into their schedule in a much more natural way. So that's how we do strategic planning in general, or quarterly planning in general at Slack, and how we align with our OKRs. On our design team, we also have design team goals, and we set those goals on a yearly basis. And so, our goals for this year as a design team, that's as a function. So like my responsibility as the head of design is to make sure design as a function is healthy and productive, that our employees feel engaged, that they feel included in the process, and that they're doing fantastic work. And they're doing really high quality work and constantly elevating the bar for the craft and quality of design at Slack. And so this year, the design team's focus has been really on how we grow and evolve. And so I have a design operations team. It's a small team within design that has helped us identify a number of programs that our designers can utilize that will help increase and improve their hard skills as well as their soft skills. And then the other thing that we have prioritized this year is the growth of people who are underrepresented in design outside of Slack. And so we partnered with a group called ADP List, which is a fantastic mentorship organization. And our designers are becoming mentors with them. And then we are speaking at ADP List events and sharing our knowledge with the rest of ADP List's worldwide community, in the hopes that we will help mentor people from groups that are underrepresented in tech and design.
That's a really cool initiative. So I'm sure lots of people benefited from that. I think you mentioned you have a design ops team. So maybe you can actually elaborate a little bit on how the design team is structured, because that sounds quite interesting.
Yeah. So our structure isn't rocket science. I report to our chief product officer tomorrow. And then I have design VPs and directors who report directly to me, one for each pillar. And then our head of design ops reports to me. And then we have a content design team that reports to me. And then each of those teams have their substructures, and all the designers sort of report into that. And so it's pretty obvious that I would have the design leads from each of the pillars report directly to me. But design ops, I have report directly to me because it's important for a healthy design organization at the size that we are at Slack, which is around 90 people, to have an operations team that helps us execute on programs that are important for the design function, but that live outside of the product roadmap. And what I found is that unless you have a team that's dedicated to that, it becomes very challenging to do that well. It becomes 10% of some designers' responsibilities, and it's the lowest 10% because there's always going to be some kind of fire that they need to put out on the product side, and they'll always put their sort of responsibility associated with the team's function on the back burner. So that's why we have a design ops function that is separate and reports directly to me. Then we have a content design function, and that team is focused on the words and the tone and the language that we use to describe Slack. And it's important for that function to report directly to me as well, because Slack has such a strong brand voice. And we speak in a certain way that is different than many other companies. And it's very different than many companies that are in the enterprise technology space. So because Slack has this special brand voice, and we also believe that we want to evolve the content design function in a very unique and focused way, I have that team is separate from the rest of the pillar teams. So then as a leader, I'm very hands-on. I help connect the dots across the team. I make sure that high-level themes are carried forward across the entire design organization because I have a central view into the work of all of our teams. I maintain a high bar for hiring new designers and bringing people onto the team. So we're constantly raising the bar for the quality and capabilities of designers who join our team. And I provide creative and product direction. And I'm also, I see my responsibility as helping us think about how we can evolve and transform and create visions and move into new spaces. And then in terms of who we hire, we tend to focus on generalists. So people who can do the broad spectrum of design, from doing user experience, mapping user flows, thinking about the overarching user experience, the interaction design. And then we also seek to find people who are very good visual designers and who think very visually, because ultimately, I believe one of the key differentiators that designers bring to the table is that we tell stories in pictures. And oftentimes what I've seen in companies throughout the companies that I've worked at, there's a blurry line between product managers and designers when it comes to defining user flows, thinking about product requirements, understanding the needs of the customer. Designers can do that. Sometimes product managers can do that. What designers do uniquely is we draw inspiring pictures that bring a level of emotion and excitement and opportunity. And there's innovation that comes in the act of actually defining the design. And that's why I think it's important for people to have the ability to actually draw compelling pictures. That's why we look for people who are more visually oriented as designers. And then, of course, we look for people who have really good logic skills. They're smart, they can present well, they can influence the groups they work on. And then it's like we're humble and we're collaborative. So we look for people who are humble and collaborative.
That sounds great. Yeah, the blurry line from product managers and product designers definitely, something that we are always trying to redefine. Actually, maybe you can share a bit like at Slack, how do you decide like which part of the scope belongs to which team?
Well, it's pretty clear at Slack. I think at other companies, I'll just say it's been less clear. At Airbnb, for example, I was the head of their homes design team. So homes is the team that was responsible for the home experience, both for hosts and guests. So it was about 93% of the business. And after my first year at Airbnb, I had the opportunity to become the general manager of the guest product team, the whole guest organization. So I essentially was leading product engineering, data science, financial planning and analysis, the design team and the research team, and the product specialist team that all focused on the guest booking experience. And that was an amazing experience to be a business owner as a design leader. I did that for 9 months and I decided to refocus back on design because it was something that I loved, but it was much more flexible at Airbnb. I think at Slack, it's much more traditional. Product managers are responsible for the roadmap. They're responsible for, unblocking teams. They're responsible for providing guidance. They're responsible for cross-team communication, making sure teams are aligned, making prioritization calls, ensuring that the team is prepared as they move forward, and then they're very much involved in launching their features and getting them out the door. And the design team, on the other hand, is part of that entire journey, but we're very much focused on building the product. We're getting in there, we're working with the engineers, we're collaborating in real time with our engineering team, we're prototyping with our engineering team. We're painting pictures of the current reality as well as where we're headed into the future. When I look at the types of outputs that I'd like to see my team create, I like my team to explain things and help move the product forward, again, by drawing, not by talking, not so much by writing, because that's not our sweet spot. And we have a culture at Slack that's very focused on prototyping. And so if our designers are actually drawing, it means that our engineers have things to build from. And that's the space that I love our designers to really focus on. And we can be massively influential doing that. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. It's absolutely true. I'd rather have somebody essentially help the product move along as a designer by drawing examples of where it can go and creating a lot of variations and prototypes along the way than writing about things for weeks about what it could be without actually drawing what it could be. That's not getting us anywhere. We're churning on a theoretical concept versus actually realizing it, building it, playing with it. It's the only way you get to the truth of whether a product is successful is by building it. So writing about it is not building it at all. So that's some of the separation that I see.
Okay, that is, thanks for taking us through a process. Very insightful. I think, it's interesting that you wore many hats in Airbnb also. So I have a question that's actually about, if there are any tensions between I think it's common in product teams product organizations to have tension between user experience and also business goals. Is that something that you have experience with at Slack or maybe in a past experience, and how do you usually mitigate that?
Yeah. So at Slack, I feel pretty fortunate that there isn't a lot of tension between our design team and our, sort of the business goals or outcome. And I have a theory why, because I've worked at places where there have been tension, and I've also seen tension within the industry as well. So I think designers tend to be very focused on our customers, very empathetic to our customers. That's kind of part of our unique responsibility. We are, first and foremost, our customer advocates. Also, designers tend to be less, and this is for better or for worse, but I think it's actually a little bit for the worse, but we tend to be less aware of how our business works and how finance works within our business. And so we're not necessarily thinking at all times about how important it is for the company to make money and stay solvent and stay in business versus how important it is to create a great experience for our customers. So in some companies, what ends up happening is that the product team is focused on making sure the company stays solvent. They're focused on maximizing the extraction of value from their customers. I see this a lot in ad-driven companies. They can say that, well, we're providing value for people by giving them ads, but you can flip that around and say, well, you're giving them ads for products they don't want. And so you're actually extracting a massive amount of value from them and you're stealing their data at the same time. So that's actually kind of a business model that a lot of ad-based companies use, and you can spin it however way you want. But what ends up happening is that when designers are truly focused on value creation versus value extraction, in some companies where there is a focus on value extraction, it becomes more challenging for the designers to feel comfortable with what the business is doing. You see that in a lot of different sort of dark patterns in design. I've seen some patterns recently in certain apps where they're really pushing promotions for features. So when you end a meeting, there's a big promotion that says, hey, check out our chat feature in our video app. And it's I didn't really care about your chat feature, but you just pushed it in front of my face. It's almost like an in-product promotion. And so if, as a designer, you're thinking about value creation versus value extraction, that's kind of, it's not thinking so much about being a great host to your customers. So that's what happens sometimes when I think that designers and business people sort of have a conflict. Here's another good case. At one point, YouTube on mobile was literally this stack of ads, and you could barely even see the actual video content. And that's not a designer. I mean, it is the head of design is responsible for that, but it's also a set of 6 different business teams all vying for their different ad placements for them to hit their OKRs. And they never had an OKR around making sure that the end experience of YouTube on mobile was as good as it possibly could be for the reasons why people were there, which is to watch the video. So that can also happen where you have multiple product managers, multiple product goals, all sort of like landing in the same product space, and nobody's looking over the whole experience, and nobody really has the authority over the whole experience. And furthermore, there isn't a goal to make sure the overarching experience is great and it's not prioritized. That can also happen. Now, at Slack, we tend to be very aligned around a core mantra of value creation versus value extraction. We're a product that people pay for as a tool. We don't sell ads. Engagement is not our top line metric. In fact, if we're successful in our mission to make people's working lives more simple, more productive, and more pleasant, you might actually see engagement go down because people are more productive. They're able to get more done faster. So we don't really use those kind of metrics to guide the way that we build or think about product. And because we're aligned around that, it ends up being, I think, a much more harmonious experience for our designers and product managers to work together. There's very few conflicts. We also are a very principled company when we build products. And one of our core product principles is be a great host. I can go into that a bit more, but because we have that principle, we can always come back to it and question whether we're being a great host to our customer in order to get aligned when we have contentious issues.
Cool. Definitely want to learn more about the principles that Slack uses. But just before we move on, you mentioned that since engagement isn't top line metric that you use, so what's the guiding metric across all teams?
Oh, we don't have a guiding, as far as I understand, we don't have a guiding metric across all teams. I mean, we do look at, revenue growth, and that comes through a number of different channels. And, so we do have obviously we have a financial plan, we have financial goals, but from a, product usage perspective, I would say one of our more important product oriented metrics is our reliability and our uptime. That's like probably the most important thing, that Slack doesn't go down for people. And then in terms of, sort of top line goals, there's messages sent, we look at things like that. But we see those as goals that, they're not at the very, very top line. They're more goals that we use to understand the impact of the individual features that we launch and whether they have, moved those important metrics in a positive way or not. And there's times when we see metrics actually move in ways that one might think is, at first blush, not necessarily positive. What that indicates to us is that there's been a change in behavior. And it's important for us to understand why that behavior change happened. So we tend to be, we're not metrics driven, we're metrics informed. We use metrics as one data point. We also have many other very important data points. We have the feedback from our customers. We listen to very closely. We have the feedback from our, end users when we do usability testing. We get that from different types of users, people who are less sophisticated in Slack, people who are more sophisticated in Slack. We get feedback from, before we release product, we get feedback from a group called our Slack champions. They are people who are typically administrators of Slack at larger organizations, all in one shared channel in Slack together. And then we will oftentimes release beta features to them and get their feedback well before we release it out to others. And that's a really, really fantastic way to get customer feedback. And I would recommend it to everybody who's on this call. It's fantastic, especially if you have a sales-oriented organization. It's a great way to have a very high touch with your customers. So we're always looking at these different inputs, and data and our metrics is one input into helping us make decisions, but it's not by far, we're not led by it. We're not driven by it.
Oh, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, it's awesome to see that. I mean, it's like everything you mentioned, it's really caring about the users and providing awesome user experience. Yeah. I think we touched a little bit on the principles that you used to that we follow for design in Slack. Would you like to elaborate a bit more on that?
Yeah. So, when you ask the question about where there is tension between product and design, our principles, we have product principles, 5 of them. And these product principles are really meant to help us get aligned as a team, both horizontally within our cross-functional team, as well as vertically up to our executives and back down again. The principles were established basically via conversations with Stuart, our CEO, and Cal, our CTO, and Tamar, our CPO. And we worked with them for a period of months to boil down the principles that guide the way our executives are thinking about how to build product at Slack into a format that was digestible by the entire organization. Once we had these principles in hand, we went on a big roadshow. We shared them with everybody. We made stickers. We put them up on big boards in the hallways when we were still in the office. And now they're a part of onboarding for every new employee who comes into the product and design organization. So people really understand these principles. So the first one is make it simple, which, that's basically, it's like, don't make your users think. And what that really is focused on is this notion of not necessarily creating a simplistic product, because sometimes you're making a product that is inherently complicated, but it's about how we present information to our customers so that they understand the product. And instead of overloading them with everything they need to know at once, how can we break down what they need to know every step of the way so they get only the information necessary to be successful as they progress in using Slack over and over again. So this has big impacts in how we think about how people onboard into Slack. It has a big impact in terms of how we present the interface in Slack. We've been progressively simplifying Slack's interface since I've been here. And I'm pretty proud of where we've landed, where there's fewer icons at the very top level. There's a lot fewer things to have to guess about or understand in Slack. And that has a number of other strategic benefits when it comes to adding more powerful functionality as well. But that's the first principle. Second principle is be a great host. People are inherently filled with bias. When we build product, we are inherently filled with the bias that we have for our own ideas. We think because it's our idea, it must be the best idea. But oftentimes it's not really aligned with what our customers need. And so we're constantly trying to check our bias as a product team, learn about customers, learn about their needs, and really focus on what they need versus what we think they need. The next one is prototype the path. This one to me is, I think, the most important. Prototype the path is really focused on making sure that we are building prototypes every step of the way as we build Slack. And so our product managers, our engineers, our designers are all aligned around this idea of, basically we call it tasting the soup. So once we actually have a set of bets made for our product and we know that we want to go in a certain direction, then instead of writing more documents about how the product might work, we turn to our engineering and design team who work very closely together, who build a rapid prototype that's with live data that we can all basically come around the table and we test the soup. How does it taste? Does that animation work better? Does that make sense to have that icon there? Does this whole product make sense, or does it feel strange? And we do that over and over and over again. Our engineers are constantly throwing away code. So we're not precious about the code at this point. And then once we actually have the thing that we've sculpted and molded collectively together into something that we think is good, then we give it to that Slack champions group. And we get feedback from the champions. We get feedback from customers in usability sessions. We get feedback from people at Slack and then other places. We take all that feedback in and we continue to prototype. And we do that until we have something that we think is really good. And then we start to harden it and make the code more robust and get it ready for market. And we do that better than any company I've ever worked at in my 23 years in technology. And it's a very fun way to build product. It's super satisfying and it's very customer centered. I mean, after all, Slack is used, by millions of people in countries across the world at companies of different sizes. And there's no way for us to understand how what we build is going to be used by people across the world. So we actually have to get it out there and we have to prototype. We're constantly evolving. The other two principles are don't reinvent the wheel. So we're not here to innovate just for innovation's sake. We know that people are familiar with existing computing patterns. And so in the spirit of being a great host, we don't want to try to reinvent new computing patterns that are only going to cause people to have to learn more things. And then the last one is take bigger, bolder bets. And this is really about focusing our product energy instead of focusing on features that may, move the needle, say, by 100%, but the overarching impact on an important metric is only 0.001%. That's not a useful project, right? It's just not useful. And so what we try to do is identify really big areas for us to tackle and then focus and align our resources on those most important areas. So those are our product principles. And we use those throughout the product development process. So our teams use them to make decisions. If you're at a certain point, you're not quite sure what to do. One group wants to go one way, another group wants to go another way. We use those product principles to get people aligned so they can move forward faster.
Oh, yeah, the principle sounds like really good. I guess a lot of people, companies listening into the session probably can learn a lot from Slack. I think we are almost out of time. I think I have one last question before we conclude the session. So now that the world is opening up again post-pandemic, I think it's the same in Southeast Asia as what you're experiencing in US. With people going back into the office, with various work arrangements, do you have any advice on how teams can develop processes or how we can basically ease that transition?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this. It's a topic that we obviously think a lot about at Slack because Slack is, people's digital headquarters now. And, we've definitely, built a lot of features in Slack that help people work more remotely. And obviously people were using Slack before the pandemic. So we're really thinking now about how we can bridge those worlds of, we call it hybrid work. So we also at Slack have a group called the Future Forum that is a consortium of companies worldwide that looks at surveying knowledge workers and understanding their perspectives on work and whether they're ready to come back to the office, whether they want to work from home. And the data is pretty clear. People are most excited and interested in having flexible work. Both in terms of where they work, so is it the office or at home, as well as when they work. Is it just the typical 9 to 5, or is it more flexible working hours? And in fact, people are most interested in flexible working hours, at least in the survey that the Future Forum did recently. And so I think it's important for leaders to keep that in mind when structuring the way that their teams work. And it's important for leaders to be very aware of the individual needs of their employees, because you can make working policies that apply to your entire company, but we're in the age of the individual. and people are able to vote with their feet. And we see a lot of people leaving companies now and moving from one company to another in order to achieve better flexibility in their work. And we also see that COVID is not gone. Maybe it will never be gone. And so it's also, I think, a time for experimentation. We can't set some policies around how we work and how we collaborate in this new world, I think, quite yet, because we're still learning about it. So I would encourage folks to think about running experiments on your flexible working policy. Think about, just like you run an experiment with building a product feature, you don't know how it's going to go, so you run an experiment. You can do the same sort of thing with your organization. But when you run those experiments, it's really important to be transparent with people at your work. It's important to say, we're not quite sure what's happening. This is what we're seeing. This is what we're hearing from you. We're going to run an experiment around the way that we collaborate, the way that we work both in the office as well as outside of the office, our flexible working policies. We're running this as an experiment. We're going to check in with you to see how it goes. And then we'll iterate and we'll update our policies as we learn more. So I think that's really important. Now, on the flip side, I think it's really important to think about what tools that you're using to encourage flexible work. And, hopefully folks are using Slack. I think it's a fantastic product to enable that. But it's also important to think about how you use Slack to be most empathetic and respectful to your employees. So, for example, I use schedule send. I don't send messages after 5 p.m. and I don't send messages on the weekend. I may have people who are working at Slack who have chosen to flexibly work on, between 5 and 8 p.m. That's fine. They're not going to get my message until 8 a.m. the next morning, right? And so I think it's important to think about not just what tools you use, but what policies you have around your tools to encourage a better level of empathy for those around you who may be working more flexibly or who just want to have a better work-life balance. So that's my suggestion.
Those are really good tips. I hope every company can find the best configuration for themselves. So I think that's all the time we have for today. Thanks so much, Ethan. Thanks for giving us lots of insights and lots to think about. So for all of those that tuned in from all over the world, thank you for joining us today. So this is the end of the session. I'll hand this back to our MC. Nat, back to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Celine and Ethan, as well as the Slack team, for that wonderful session on the design process and strategy of Slack. Up next, we have our last session for PDC 2022, where we're going to talk about product leadership using the Jobs to be Done framework. Don't miss it. I'll catch you there.